He was the only black student in a room full of future CEOs, and the professor set a trap just for him. An unsolvable equation, crafted to humiliate him in front of the entire class. They laughed when he froze at the board, but what none of them knew was that Elijah had already cracked the lie, and he was about to expose all of them. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. It was the kind of silence that felt manufactured, like a sterile room scrubbed too clean. Elijah Walker stepped into the cavernous lecture hall with a backpack too worn for a place so polished. Rows of polished wood desks arched upward like a cathedral of knowledge. On every bench sat faces, mostly white, mostly confident, mostly dressed in the silent uniform of generational comfort, Patagonia fleeces, fresh notebooks, AirPods resting casually in one ear. Elijah's dark skin stood out like a cracked chalk line across a pristine blackboard. He paused for only a second before walking to the front row, not out of arrogance but necessity. His vision was terrible from late-night study sessions in public libraries with dim lighting. He couldn't afford to miss a single symbol. Every number mattered here. He took a seat. The girl next to him, blonde with nails like sculpted glass, glanced at him, then at her phone, then scooted her MacBook a few inches away. No words, just that passive gesture of rejection that stung worse than anything over. It was his first day in advanced theoretical mathematics, a class designed for juniors and seniors, not 19-year-old scholarship. Freshmen from Southside Chicago. Blackwood University called itself progressive. Their brochures showed smiling brown faces in groups. Their website boasted inclusive innovation. But when Elijah looked around the room, he saw the lie. He was the only black student. Not just in the class, in the entire STEM wing. When Professor Gregory Lofton entered, the murmuring stopped. He was tall, gray-haired, and moved like a man who expected the air to part before him. His tweed jacket was as crisp as his vowels, a former Harvard Ph.D. recipient of the Math and Logic Order of Distinction, and the unofficial gatekeeper of Blackwood's most competitive academic track. Lofton dropped his briefcase on the desk with a thud, turned to the board, and without a word, began writing a complex string of numbers and symbols. The chalk screeched, punctuation marks of power. No greeting, no syllabus, just authority. Elijah copied the equation in real time, his pen moving as fast as the professor's hand. Around him, students shuffled, some already looking lost. But Elijah's eyes never left the board. Professor Lofton turned slowly and scanned the room. "I don't usually entertain underclassmen in this course," he said, his voice sharp like broken glass. "But someone in admissions insisted that we make exceptions this year." A few students chuckled. Elijah didn't move. Lofton's gaze settled on him. "Mr. Walker, is it?" "Yes, sir," Elijah replied evenly. "You believe you belong in this class." "I believe the work speaks for itself." Some students smirked. One near the back muttered, "Affirmative action confidence." Elijah heard it. He always heard it. The class continued. Lofton didn't engage students much. He dropped terms like nonlinear partial differential equations and topological vector spaces like casual conversation. Elijah kept pace, but each time he raised his hand, thoughtful, precise questions, Lofton nodded, but rarely answered. Yet when the blonde girl asked something already discussed, he smiled patiently and explained it again. After class, students filed out in clusters. Elijah remained seated, reviewing notes. He noticed two legacy kids, whispering as they walked past, eyeing him with casual contempt. One laughed and bumped the other's shoulder. Back in his dorm, a tiny shared unit, 2 buildings off campus, Elijah opened the assignment portal. The first homework set was already live. He stayed up until 3 a.m., solving all 20 questions. No shortcuts, no calculators, just proofs written by hand, double-checked against his notes. When the grades posted a few days later, his was the only perfect score. But there was no email from the professor, no acknowledgement in class, no returned paper with excellent work, just silence. Meanwhile, other students, white students, with lower scores got nods, comments, and in one case, an offer to assist in a future project. Elijah noticed. He didn't complain. He'd been taught not to. His mother used to say, "You don't get to be mediocre and black, you've got to be undeniable." But whispers started. One student in the study hall asked if he'd had help. Another said, "No way he got it perfect. Probably some backdoor tutor." They didn't know Elijah had taught himself calculus in high school by checking out textbooks meant for college students, that he used to spend hours watching MIT lectures on a cracked phone in a public library, that his mind worked like clock gears, one click unlocking the next. He said nothing, just kept showing up, front row, ready. Then came the next class. Lofton walked in carrying a small box. He looked particularly pleased with himself that day. As the class began packing up after another round of dry equations and intellectual fencing, Lofton spoke. "Mr. Walker, stay behind a moment." Elijah froze. The room slowly emptied. A few students glanced back, eyebrows raised. Was he in trouble? Had he been caught for something? When they were alone, Lofton sat on the edge of the desk, arms crossed. "You're quite the problem solver," he said coolly. "I try to be thorough," Elijah replied, cautious. Lofton tilted his head. "We've had students get good grades before, but your performance is unusually consistent." Elijah said nothing. Lofton stood and walked toward the board. He picked up a piece of chalk, paused, then turned. "Let's see how far your talent really goes." He began writing a problem. Fast, complex, long. Elijah watched, unsure whether this was a pop quiz, a challenge or a trap. But the feeling in the room changed. Something about the professor's smile wasn't right. It wasn't academic curiosity. It was something colder. As Elijah stepped toward the board to solve it, the professor's voice dropped. "Careful, Mr. Walker. This one's not in any textbook. The trap equation no one could solve." Elijah Walker stepped into the cavernous lecture hall of room 214 at Blackwood University. The hum of students rearranging chairs still echoing as he found his seat. He had arrived early, as always, his backpack pressed lightly against his side, his mind already orbiting tomorrow's theorem. Never twice the same. He glanced around. Here, the only black face in an advanced mathematics class filled with legacy students, whose fathers, mothers, grandparents had sat in the same seats decades ago. The room's early light caught on polished tabletops shimmering like some gilded promise of privilege, while he sat in the periphery, a scholar on scholarship, a prodigy among pedigreed names. Professor Gregory Lofton entered, his tall frame framed in the doorway, tweed jacket slightly rumpled, silver hair sharp at the temples. He surveyed the room, an almost imperceptible nod, then cleared his throat. "Good morning, everyone. Let's begin." His voice, crisp and deliberate, carried a confidence that shut off idle conversation immediately. And when his gaze rested a moment longer on Elijah than on the rest, the room chilled slightly. Elijah looked down at his notes, not because he feared the professor, but because he respected the field. Yet even his calm held tension. He sensed the glances, the measured silence after he sneezed, the way conversation paused when he set his pen down. On his first day, someone had whispered, "Do you think he really belongs here?" He heard it loud inside his mind. He felt it like a scratch in his skin. Lofton paused at the front, flipped open his slides. "Today," he said, "we're going to test something a little different." He clicked. On the screen appeared a single equation, dense, sprawling across 2 slides, annotated in LaTeX notation, variables, integrals, an unfamiliar symbol that none of the students recognized. "This equation," Lofton said, his eyes sweeping the class, "is based on a thesis from an Ivy League institution. It's reputed to be unsolved, even by the originators. I'm naming it Challenge X." His smile was polite, but it didn't reach his eyes. A murmur ran through the room. Some students shuffled in their seats, others leaned forward. Elijah sat upright. He knew his mathematics from high school competitions, from late nights, from the rhythms of proofs. But this was something else, something bold. Lofton continued. "I want someone to come up in front of the class and attempt to solve Challenge X on the board. Full marks if you do, no penalty if you fail. I'll pick." He paused, then his voice softened. "Mr. Walker." A flush of surprise. Elijah felt it in his cheeks. Eyes swiveled. The room's air changed. The legacy kids exchanged glances. Some grinned, some narrowed their eyes. Elijah rose. He took a few steady breaths. Every step to the board felt heavier than it should. His classmates watched, not companions anymore, but spectators. He wondered if he'd ever been chosen like this before. As he reached the board, the equation filled nearly the entire space. Nested fractions, a summation inside a radical, a condition of convergence that looked suspiciously like no real solution. Really, the equation was beautifully crafted. But to what purpose? Elijah caught a flicker in Lofton's eyes, the slight nod, the tightening of his lips, and a corner of the class jerked upward in cautious amusement. Elijah turned to face the equation, chalk in hand. A silence as thick as stone settled in the room. He exhaled quietly. He began to write. He identified the summation. He tried to substitute variables. He brought constants to bear, but nothing aligned as expected. The terms refused cancellation. Integrals stalled. The radical refused to collapse. The class sat frozen. Even Lofton whispered something. Proceed. Inside Elijah's mind, the one constant echoed. This is wrong. But wrong in what way? He took another breath, recalibrated. He recalled his advanced analysis courses, his mentor's lectures, his summer research. He found no standard tactic to tame the expression. One after another, he tried transformations, integral substitutions, each leading to dead ends. The chalk scraped the board, the equation grew, the clock ticked, the professor watched, arms folded. Behind the scenes, unseen by the class, a different calculus played out. Lofton had taken the Ivy League thesis, not to challenge students fairly, but to humiliate the only black student in the room. He had altered the thesis slightly, inserted a flawed coefficient, changed a boundary condition, made the entire structure unsolvable by any honest method. And he calculated the spectacle. The legacy students would watch as the token forced his way to fail, reaffirming their quiet assumption that perhaps he didn't belong. Elijah paused. He wiped sweat at his brow, even though the room was cool. He glanced at his classmates, some leaning back, sipping their coffees, others whispering to one another. One of them, a legacy kid named Marcus, smirked. He tapped his pen against the table. Another student, Alyssa, furrowed her brow. Less sneer, more confusion. Elijah realized the entire class had become a theater, and he was the unwilling lead. Mr. Walker, Lofton said, his voice low, but audible to all. You're making progress. I trust you'll uncover something. The tone encouragement. But the subtext, don't fail me publicly. Elijah looked at the board again. He'd reached a point where the radical refused simplification. He tried expanding the summation in a standard fashion. Nothing. He tried approaching via contour integration. No path. The variables tangled. Something fundamental blocked him. He realized, the equation, as presented, defied its own premises. He stopped. The chalk hovered. The room exhaled collectively. He turned toward Lofton and said quietly, Professor, this doesn't make sense. Something's wrong. His voice echoed. He meant the equation. But to the class, he might mean him. A ripple of shock traversed the room. Some mouths parted. Others narrowed. Lofton's face shifted imperceptibly. A flicker of annoyance, then mask. The legacy kids looked on. Their amusement paused. The professor raised his eyebrows. And just then Kevin Min, who had been quietly sketching derivations in his notebook, raised a hand. Professor, he said, voice steady. If I may, he's correct. The boundary condition isn't met. The summation diverges under those limits. A hush. Elijah turned his head slightly toward Kevin, surprise evident. Kevin's eyes met his, a small nod. The trap had a flaw visible to someone watching closely. Lofton's lips tightened. He looked at Kevin and then at Elijah. The class waited for what would come. The professor cleared his throat. Mr. Walker, you may step down. Elijah did, mind racing. He returned to his seat, chalk dust in the air. The room stayed silent. He felt some of the legacy kids glare. Others watched him like a wounded animal. Lofton turned away, flipped to the next slide, as though the equation had never mattered. In that moment, something inside Elijah shifted. He realized he wasn't just solving math anymore. He was navigating a hidden battlefield. He recognized the equation as barrier, not challenge. He understood. The institution would tolerate his excellence only if it remained invisible. He glanced at Kevin, who drew him aside after class. I saw you stumble, but I also saw the flaw. Let's talk. Elijah swallowed. His chest tight. He promised himself he would find proof. Not just of the flaw in the equation, but of the design behind it. The seed of war was planted. The lecture hall emptied. Chattering students walked out. Legacy kids high-fived. Some joked. Some didn't look his way. Lofton packed his materials with precision. Elijah noticed the barely concealed satisfaction in his manner. Then, as Elijah gathered his things, a small envelope slipped between his notebook pages. No note, just his name typed on the front, Elijah Walker. He opened it quietly. Inside, a single sheet photocopied, showing a variant of the equation, with a margin note. Check Lofton's version. Elijah's heartbeat sped. Someone was on his side. Someone had fought this before. But who? And why now? He left the hall under the hum of fluorescent lights, the envelope heavy in his hand, his mind racing. As he paused at the stairwell, he looked back at the board where his chalked work still lingered in his memory. The trap had been set, and he had just named it. Elijah stared at the photocopied sheet, his breath catching. Someone else had flagged the same error. Who had sent this? And what would happen if he pursued it? They laughed not because Elijah was wrong, but because someone made sure he couldn't be right. For the rest of that lecture, Elijah felt the eyes on his back like heat. Lofton continued teaching, as if nothing had happened, the chalk clicking briskly across the board, while a low current of amusement rippled through the rows. No one spoke openly, but the atmosphere had shifted, and Elijah felt it. When the class ended, students filed out whispering. A girl in a denim jacket muttered, "Guess he's not the genius everyone said he was." Another voice, male, sharp, entitled, answered, "He got lucky on the first assignment. Lofton just exposed that." Elijah didn't turn. He packed his notebook slowly, every muscle tight with restraint. Professor Lofton erased the remaining traces of the challenge equation, whistling under his breath. As Elijah reached the door, the professor spoke. "Mr. Walker," he said without looking up, "I'd suggest you review the fundamentals before attempting advanced problems. Confidence is admirable, but misplaced confidence can be dangerous in mathematics." The words hit harder than a slap. Outside, the hallway felt colder than usual. Students brushed past him, a few with half-hidden smirks. No one said a word directly, but he heard enough fragments. Overrated. Quota. Embarrassing. By the time Elijah reached his dorm, the whispers had already found their way online. A student-run chat forum for the math department had a thread titled "The Freshman Who Froze." Someone had even uploaded a blurry phone photo of him standing at the board, chalk in hand, with the caption, "When you realize it's not high school anymore." He read it twice, closed his laptop, and stared at the blank wall. That night, Elijah sat at his desk under the dim glow of a thrift store lamp, the sound of rain tapping against his window. The equation wouldn't leave his mind. Every number, every variable haunted him. He opened his notebook again. Line after line of his notes stared back. Logical, meticulous, flawless, until the exact point where it fell apart. That's where the inconsistency had begun. He copied the equation onto a blank page, isolating each part. Something about it was unnatural. The structure defied mathematical integrity. The variable sequence contradicted the root theorem it was built upon. Whoever had written it knew exactly what they were doing, inserting a flaw subtle enough to escape casual notice, but catastrophic enough to destroy any attempt to solve it. Elijah's pulse quickened. He knew he hadn't imagined it. He opened his laptop and began researching. The equation was supposedly from an unsolved Ivy League thesis. He traced the reference, or tried to. He searched every academic archive available to students, scanned through papers from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT. Nothing matched. Not even close. Hours passed. Midnight bled into 1 a.m., then 2. Finally, he found a vaguely similar formula from a 1989 Yale dissertation, Dr. Philip Raskin's explorations of nonlinear matrix systems. But the version in that paper wasn't what Lofton had written. There were differences, deliberate ones. The variable substitution in Lofton's version wasn't a mistake, it was a distortion, a trap. Elijah leaned back, hands pressed against his forehead. He'd been set up. He replayed every detail of that moment in class. The professor's tone, his smirk, the way he'd turned to the board and announced the challenge. It wasn't random. It was planned. But why? The answer wasn't mathematical. It was personal. He thought back to his first day, the way Lofton had singled him out in front of everyone, questioning why a freshman was in an advanced course. The way he'd emphasized exceptions. Elijah whispered under his breath. He wanted to make an example out of me. He opened the original document again, cross-referencing the theorem line by line. The inconsistency stood out like a lie under interrogation. No ordinary student could have spotted it, but Elijah could. He had proof, if he could show it properly. He knew he couldn't confront Lofton alone. Not yet. He needed someone he could trust. There was only one person who came to mind, Ms. Aria Kane. She was a quiet storm on campus. 35, brilliant, composed, and one of the few black faculty members in STEM. She'd earned her doctorate from Georgia Tech and still carried the kind of southern poise that made her both approachable and unshakable. Students whispered about how she never fit in with the old guard professors, which was precisely why Elijah respected her. He sent her an email just after 3 in the morning. Subject: need to discuss something serious. Message: it's about something that happened in Lofton's class. I think he set me up. I can explain. Please, can we meet? She replied before dawn. Arya Kane, my office. 10 a.m. Don't bring anyone else. When Elijah arrived, the math department hallways were nearly empty. The smell of chalk and stale coffee hung in the air. Ms. Kane's office was small but warm, framed degrees on one wall, a window that looked out onto a rain-washed courtyard, and a shelf lined with math books and vintage poetry. She looked up from her desk as he entered. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp, the kind of gaze that missed nothing. Elijah, she said, motioning for him to sit. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't, he admitted. I had to check something. He slid his notebook across her desk. It's about the problem Professor Lofton gave me yesterday. Arya frowned slightly. The challenge equation? You heard about that. Her lips tightened. Word travels fast here, especially when a black student is involved. He hesitated, then began explaining everything. How the professor had called him out, the equation's structure, the moment he realized it couldn't be solved. He detailed the differences between the version Lofton gave and the original one from the Yale thesis. She listened without interrupting, flipping through his notes. Her brow furrowed deeper with each page. Elijah, she said slowly, are you absolutely certain these substitutions weren't just errors in transcription? They weren't mistakes, he said firmly. He wrote it like that on purpose. Arya leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowing. Do you have proof of what the original equation looked like? Yes, he said, opening his laptop. Here. He pulled up the scanned dissertation and pointed out the inconsistencies, the inverted constant, the missing factor, the sign that flipped the solution into contradiction. She studied the screen silently for a long time. The clock ticked. The only sound was the rain outside. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, deliberate. You're right. Elijah exhaled. Relief, but only for a second, because her expression changed. Do you understand what this means? She asked quietly. That he tried to make me fail? No, she said, shaking her head. That he knew you couldn't solve it. That he designed it to make you look like you didn't belong here. Elijah's chest tightened. Why would he? Because your presence challenges him, she said simply. You're a freshman black, and better than most of his top seniors. Men like Lofton don't admit that kind of truth easily. He looked down. So what do I do? Arya stood and walked to the window, staring out at the misty courtyard. You do what every brilliant black scholar before you's had to do, she said softly. You prove him wrong, but not in his classroom, in the light. Elijah nodded slowly, understanding more than he wanted to. I'll need evidence, he said. Real proof. You'll get it, she replied. But be careful. Men like Lofton don't make mistakes. They build traps, then bury the bodies under procedure. She turned back to him, her voice quieter now. You'll need allies, documentation, records. I can help you, but this has to be handled right. He met her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. Just promise me you'll keep every note, every version, every word. He nodded again, closing his laptop. He could feel something rising inside him, not just anger, but clarity. As he stood to leave, Arya flipped through one last page of his notes. Her fingers froze mid-turn. She stared at a specific line of the altered formula, and for the first time Elijah saw fear flicker across her face. Her voice was almost a whisper when she spoke. Elijah, she said slowly, this isn't just wrong. She looked up, her expression turning pale. It was meant to humiliate you. The room fell silent. Arya's hands trembled as she shut the notebook, and said, and if I'm right, he's done this before. When truth becomes inconvenient, institutions don't rush to correct it. They rush to protect the powerful. That's what Arya Kane wanted Elijah to understand, and she didn't sugarcoat it. The rain had stopped by the time they walked through the campus quad, their footsteps muffled by wet leaves. Arya's trench coat flapped slightly in the breeze, and her eyes stayed forward as she spoke. Lofton has been here 22 years, she said. He's not just a professor, He's the spine of Blackwood's mathematics program. Elijah absorbed every word. So what does that mean for us? It means he's untouchable, unless you're holding fire in both hands. You can't just be right. You have to be undeniable. The kind of truth they can't rewrite, no matter how hard they try. She led him into the faculty archives, a building with creaking wooden floors and a lobby that smelled like forgotten scholarship. Inside, she guided him to a side room that few students ever entered, the historical repository of old course materials, department files and locked cabinets labeled with years instead of subjects. Most students don't know this exists, Arya said. But if he's done this before, the patterns will be here. They got to work. For hours, they sifted through exam templates, syllabi, lecture notes, and archived tests from Lofton's past classes. Elijah scanned each page, like a detective, searching for a fingerprint. I recognize this pattern, Elijah said at one point, holding up a 209 exam. It's the same kind of structural flaw he used on me. The equation breaks at the same type of variable substitution. Arya took the paper, studied it, and nodded. Except this one was buried in a midterm, not a live demonstration. That was the difference. The trap had been quieter then. But as they dug deeper, another name surfaced. Cameron Riles, a junior from 2010 who was listed as one of the top-performing math students until suddenly, nothing. His name vanished from the academic honor roll, from publications, from research teams. He dropped out, Arya said quietly, her finger tracing the old enrollment records. Mid-semester, no explanation. Elijah's throat tightened. Do you think Lofton? I think it's time we find out. Back in Arya's office, they searched the university's internal complaint archive. It wasn't public, but faculty like her had limited access. Most reports were redacted, but then she found a digital scan of a written complaint, buried in a 2010 folder marked, "Resolved, no action." Elijah leaned over her shoulder as she read. Professor Lofton publicly challenged me in front of the class with an equation that did not appear in any course material. I was humiliated after failing to solve it. I later discovered inconsistencies that rendered the problem unsolvable. When I attempted to address this, I was accused of misunderstanding the concept and my academic record was flagged. I believe I was targeted unfairly, and it has affected my mental health and confidence to continue at Blackwood. Cameron Riles, March. Elijah stepped back, numb. He did the same thing, the exact same thing. And the university swept it under the rug, Arya said. This complaint should have triggered a review, at the very least a faculty inquiry. Why didn't it? She closed the file and turned to him. Because Lofton had tenure. He brought in research grants. He published every year. And Cameron? He was just another student, one they thought would disappear. But he didn't disappear, Elijah said, a fire building in his chest. He just stopped being here. Arya hesitated, then pulled out her phone. There's no contact listed on file, but I've seen his name before. Let me try something. She tapped through a few alumni forums, scrolled a list, and stopped. Got it. Cameron Riles, class of 2012. But he didn't graduate from Blackwood. Transferred. Finished a computer science degree in Michigan. She turned the screen toward Elijah. A LinkedIn profile. A smiling face. Same eyes, older now. Should we message him? Elijah asked. No, she said. We call him. He needs to hear your voice. They sat in silence, as the phone rang. Once, twice, a click, then a voice, deep, but clear. Hello? Elijah hesitated. Hi. Is this Cameron Riles? A pause. Who's asking? My name is Elijah Walker. I'm a student at Blackwood. I think something happened to me, that happened to you, in Lofton's class. The line went quiet. No sound, not even breath. Then, the voice returned, low, measured. But something beneath it cracked. I've been waiting for this call. Cameron's voice dropped a note lower. You have no idea how deep this goes. The institution had a history of brilliance being erased when it came in black skin. Elijah Walker was only beginning to see how deep the pattern ran. The call with Cameron Riles the night before had left his thoughts heavy, his hands restless. Arya Kane had been right. This wasn't new, and it wasn't just about him. It was a system with roots so deep that most people stopped trying to dig, but Elijah wasn't most people. He and Arya sat in her office the next morning, blinds half closed, laptop screens glowing in the dim light. The door was locked. On the wall, the framed photo of the 1999 Blackwood Faculty Senate looked down at them. A sea of white faces, only two people of color. Arya typed notes furiously as Elijah relayed everything Cameron had told him during the late-night conversation. His name wasn't Cameron Riles, Elijah began, rubbing his temple. It's Devon Miles now. He changed it a few years after leaving Blackwood. Arya looked up. Changed his name? Yeah. Said he didn't want anything that tied him back here. The words lingered in the air like a ghost. Devon Miles, 33, was now a senior software engineer in Atlanta. Well-respected, successful, but cautious. When Elijah first reached him, the man's voice had been guarded, like someone who'd learned to measure trust in teaspoons. On the call, Devon's tone shifted only when Elijah mentioned the trap equation. You mean that impossible one? Devon had said, his voice cracking slightly with memory. The one that made me question if I'd lost my mind. Elijah had nodded, even though Devon couldn't see it. He did the same thing to me. There'd been silence on the line for several seconds. Then Devon laughed, not with humor but disbelief. He's still doing it? Elijah's reply was quiet, but steady. Yeah. And this time, I'm not letting it slide. Now in Arya's office, Elijah replayed the conversation while she documented everything. Devon had been one of the top math students in his year. Brilliant, articulate, often described as beyond his peers. During his junior year, Professor Lofton had publicly challenged him during a departmental seminar, presenting a modified proof and claiming Devon's earlier research paper contained logical inconsistencies. Devon spent weeks trying to disprove the claim, until he realized the inconsistency didn't exist in his paper. It existed in Lofton's version of it. The professor had changed variables and inserted contradictions, then accused Devon of academic dishonesty when he tried to defend himself. I thought about fighting it, Devon said. But when I went to the dean, she called me defensive and said I was trying to play the victim card. A week later, Lofton filed an academic integrity complaint against me, said I was falsifying my data. They threatened to revoke my scholarship. Arya's hands froze on the keyboard. A weaponized procedure, she murmured. Classic. Devon had told Elijah that he eventually withdrew before the formal hearing. I couldn't prove anything, he'd said. My original files mysteriously disappeared from the department server. They said it was a system error. Elijah's stomach had twisted. He'd heard that same phrase too many times at Blackwood. Now Arya leaned back in her chair. We need to find that hearing record, she said. If there was even a draft of the proceedings, there'll be a paper trail. Universities don't delete, they hide. They accessed the restricted faculty archive again, cross-referencing 2010 to 2012. Every file felt like a small act of rebellion. Each click could be logged, each search traceable. But Arya wasn't deterred. There, she said suddenly, pointing at a folder labeled Faculty Senate. March. Inside were scanned minutes of a meeting, motions discussed, funding proposals, research disputes. Buried halfway through the text, in a single paragraph, was a note. Discussion held regarding student Devon Miles, formerly Riles. Faculty member G. Lofton raised concerns regarding academic integrity and data verification. Faculty voted to close the matter, pending lack of sufficient evidence to proceed. Elijah's eyes widened. They dismissed it without investigating. Arya's mouth set in a grim line. No, worse. They sanitized it. The wording closed the matter means it was formally erased. That's why there's no record in his student file. She scrolled further down. Another line, almost invisible in the footnotes. Faculty suggested reviewing course oversight for future advanced track students to prevent similar occurrences. Arya whispered. That's code. It means they were protecting him. Elijah sank back in his chair, anger rising like heat through his chest. So they've been covering for him for over a decade. They always protect the ones who make the school look good on paper, Arya said. Prestige buys silence, and tenure makes it permanent. For a moment, neither spoke. The ticking of the small desk clock was the only sound between them. Finally, Elijah broke the silence. Then we build a record of our own. Something they can't delete. He started organizing everything. His assignment, Lofton's altered problem, the original Yale dissertation, the email from Arya, and now Devon's testimony. Every file labeled, every timestamp saved. Truth doesn't matter if it's only spoken, he said quietly. It matters when it's proven. Arya nodded approvingly. Good. Documentation is power. They can twist your words, but they can't twist math. By the time the afternoon sun dipped low across the courtyard, the folder on Elijah's laptop was over a gigabyte. Screenshots, PDFs, old test scans. Arya drafted the opening of their formal complaint letter, her voice calm but resolute as she read aloud. We believe Professor Gregory Lofton has engaged in repeated academic misconduct designed to target and discredit minority students under his instruction. Attached is preliminary evidence documenting 2 separate incidents spanning over a decade, with structural similarities that cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Elijah sat quietly, listening. The gravity of the moment pressed on him. This was no longer about grades or reputation. This was history repeating itself. And this time, someone was going to stop it. After hours of reviewing, Elijah's phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. He ignored it. Another buzz, then another. He finally glanced down. Unknown. You really think you can win this? His breath hitched. He looked at Arya. Someone's texting me. She frowned. What does it say? Before he could respond, another message appeared. Unknown. Stop digging. You're making a mistake. He stared at the screen, pulse quickening. Arya leaned over, reading it. Her face hardened. Block it. I can't. There's no number. It's hidden. A third message appeared almost instantly. Unknown. Some equations aren't meant to be solved. The phone screen dimmed as the last words faded. The air between them turned heavy. Arya looked him dead in the eye. They know you're onto something. Elijah locked the phone and exhaled slowly. Then they should know. I'm not stopping. The phone buzzed again. This time just one line. Next time, it won't just be a message. The next morning, Elijah stood outside the office of Dean Marjorie Bell, a woman known around campus for her iron discipline and surgically polite smile. The formal complaint against Professor Lofton had been submitted just 48 hours earlier, signed by both Elijah and Arya Kane, with attachments so thorough they read like a legal brief. But today's meeting wasn't about justice. Not really. It was damage control, just not his. The secretary opened the heavy wooden door, and Elijah stepped inside. The office smelled of sandalwood and old paper. On the wall, a framed photo showed Dean Bell shaking hands with alumni donors. Her bookshelf overflowed with leadership books and unread novels. She motioned him to sit before closing the file in front of her. Elijah, she began, her voice neutral. Thank you for coming on short notice. He nodded, sitting straight. I'm here to follow up on the complaint. But Bell didn't acknowledge it. Instead, she reached into a folder and pulled out a different sheet, a printed scan of a test. Before we go there, she said calmly, something else has come to our attention. A concern was raised about your recent exam performance, specifically the exam from Professor Lofton's class. Elijah blinked. Concern? Yes, she said, sliding the paper toward him. There's reason to believe your answers were unusually similar to another student's. The floor dropped beneath him. What are you talking about? I worked alone. Always. Bell folded her hands. We flagged your test for plagiarism review. It's now under academic investigation. The room was spinning, but Elijah held his breath, keeping his composure. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a countermove. I just filed a complaint against Professor Lofton, he said slowly, and now I'm being investigated. Bell didn't blink. The timing is unfortunate, but these matters are handled independently. Elijah wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was too predictable. Power protects itself. It always has. I want a copy of the allegation, he said. You'll receive an official notice within 48 hours, she said. In the meantime, I suggest refraining from discussing the matter with peers. I'm not the one who leaked anything, Elijah snapped, then caught himself. Bell raised an eyebrow. We're simply trying to ensure fairness in the process. Fairness. He nearly choked on the word. By the time he left the office, the whispers had already started. 2 undergrads passed him on the stairwell, muttering just loud enough. That's him, right? The freshman under investigation? Back at his dorm, his inbox was on fire. A department-wide email had gone out. Please be advised, academic integrity investigations are currently underway involving exam discrepancies in advanced mathematics. They didn't say his name, but they didn't have to. His roommate, Greg, stood awkwardly by the doorway when he entered. Hey man, just so you know, people are talking. Like a lot. Reddit threads too. Elijah didn't answer. He just opened his laptop. The private student forum had already exploded. The top post? Prodigy or plagiarist. Followed by a grainy image of Elijah's face, cropped from a campus event photo. Comments ranged from speculation to veiled racism. Knew it. No way a freshman gets perfect scores without help. Affirmative action strikes again. He's smart but not that smart. Scan. Elijah closed the screen, fingers trembling. Not from fear, from fury. The kind that made your chest too tight to breathe. It was happening all over again. Not just what they did to Devon Miles. This was the institutional playbook, step by step. He called Arya. They've opened an investigation, he said the moment she answered. Plagiarism. From the last test. There was silence on the line. They're trying to bury your complaint before it breathes, she said finally. If you're under review, they can claim your complaint was retaliation. They're going to kill my scholarship, he said flatly. You need to fight this smart, she said. And fast. Elijah didn't sleep that night. Instead, he pulled up old emails, timestamps, and photo evidence of his handwritten study work, scanned notes he'd sent to himself at 3 a.m. before the exam. He built a private cloud folder and sent it to Arya, labeling everything. He even drafted a rebuttal, citing how his methodical steps matched no one else's. But he knew evidence wasn't enough. Not when the system wanted him guilty. By the end of the week, things got worse. His scholarship was temporarily frozen pending review, which meant he couldn't use his campus meal card. His academic advisor suddenly rescheduled indefinitely. Friends stopped replying to texts. The isolation was surgical. Effective. Designed to make him retreat. But he didn't. Instead, Elijah doubled down. He and Arya finalized the official complaint and sent it to the university's ethics committee. They included everything: the altered equation, archived examples, Devon's testimony, and screenshots of his study timestamps. Then, on a Friday morning, just as he was preparing for class, a notification popped up on his phone. Incoming video. Anonymous upload. The file was 32 seconds long. The title: Caught Cheating. Elijah Walker during Math 301 midterm. He hit play. The footage showed Elijah sitting during the last exam, his head down. Then, suddenly, a cut. The frame jumped forward, and it looked like Elijah was glancing at the paper of the student next to him. A long pause, then another glance. To the casual eye, it looked damning, but Elijah knew the video had been edited. It was a composite stitched and cut at precise moments, with just enough missing context to paint a lie. He stared at the screen in disbelief. Someone had gone through the trouble to fabricate a video just to discredit him.
His phone buzzed again. A text from Arya.
I just saw the video. This is calculated. We need the original classroom footage, before it disappears. Elijah's breath quickened. How do we even get that? Another buzz. This time, a message from a number he didn't recognize. You're not going to beat this. Just walk away. He stared at the text, his pulse in his throat. This wasn't just a campaign against a student anymore. It was a cover-up. Just then, a knock echoed at his door. He opened it to find a quiet student from his class. Kevin Min, eyes wide, face pale. He held up his phone. I saw what they did. I have the original video. Social media turned on him fast. But Elijah wasn't the one lying. The knock at his door was soft but desperate. Elijah pulled it open to find Kevin Min standing in the hallway, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like someone who'd seen too much. In his trembling hands, he held his phone. I saw what they did, Kevin whispered, his voice barely above the hum of the corridor lights. I have the original video. For a moment, Elijah just stared, unable to breathe. Behind Kevin, a group of students passed, their whispers sharp and heavy with judgment. One of them muttered, "That's him," before snickering under their breath. Elijah stepped aside. "Come in." Kevin slipped inside quickly, shutting the door behind him. He was small, nervous, the kind of student who blended into the background, too quiet to be noticed, too observant to be harmless. I record most of Lofton's classes, he said, fidgeting. For notes. You know, I have ADHD, can't focus without playback. He handed Elijah the phone. The screen showed a paused frame from the midterm. Elijah and the same student sitting beside him. Watch, Kevin said. Elijah hit play.
The real video unfolded.
Continuous. No cuts. No jumps. Just one long, unbroken shot, showing Elijah deep in concentration. Eyes fixed on his paper the entire time. He didn't glance left, didn't move suspiciously. The supposed cheating moment never happened. Elijah's throat went dry. This is the original footage? Kevin nodded. Yeah, I uploaded it to my cloud the day of the test. Can you send it to me? I already tried. The link's been corrupted. Kevin's voice cracked. Last night, when that fake video went viral, I went back to check my archive. The file's still there, but it won't play. It says restricted access. Someone tampered with it. Elijah's pulse quickened. Restricted by who? Kevin swallowed. The department server. I back up everything to my school drive. It's all stored under the math faculty domain. Elijah stared at him, realization dawning like a slow, cruel sunrise. Lofton. Kevin nodded once miserably. By morning, the fake video had escaped the confines of campus and spread like wildfire across social media. Twitter threads popped up under the tag Jane Blackwood scandal. Reddit's academic gossip boards featured posts titled Scholarship Star Exposed and Caught in 4K Freshman Fraud. The comments were brutal. Knew it. No freshman scores that high without cheating. Affirmative action kids always think they're untouchable. He's making us look bad. Kick him out already. Of course the department's covering for him. Politics. Every post felt like a blade. Strangers dissected Elijah's integrity as though it were public property. By noon, his inbox overflowed with hate messages. Anonymous, venomous, some mocked him with slurs. Others said he should withdraw quietly before he embarrassed himself further. But what hurt more than the racism was the silence. The friends who no longer texted back. The classmates who suddenly changed their seats when he walked into the library. Elijah sat at the edge of his dorm bed, phone in hand, watching his own name trend on platforms that didn't care about truth. Arya's call came mid-afternoon. I saw it, she said, her voice tight with anger. The school's letting it circulate. They haven't even released a statement defending you. They won't, Elijah said flatly. That would mean admitting something's wrong. Kevin says he has the original footage. She continued. Can you bring him to my office? Already on it. When they arrived, Arya was waiting, her laptop open, a USB drive beside her. Kevin hovered near the door like he wanted to vanish into the wall. Show me, she said. Kevin nodded, connecting his phone. The unedited video played on the screen, but as soon as Arya tried to copy it, an error message appeared. Access denied. File protected by administrative domain. Her expression darkened. That's not a normal restriction. This means someone in IT manually locked this file at the faculty level. Meaning? Elijah asked. Meaning, she said slowly. It wasn't a random hack. It was authorized. Kevin bit his lip. Professor Lofton's name is on all my shared permissions. He has access to my entire student drive for grading submissions. That includes the folder I keep my recordings in. Elijah's heart sank. So he deleted the real footage and uploaded a fake one. Not deleted, Arya corrected. He replaced it, which means he had the original in his possession. A chill swept through the room. Kevin, she said gently, do you still have the backup timestamp? He nodded. Yeah, it's on my private Google account. I saved a copy there too. Then that's our leverage, Arya said. If we can prove file manipulation timestamps metadata, we can show the edit was deliberate. Kevin hesitated. If I do this, Lofton will know it was me. He'll ruin my grade. Arya leaned forward. He can't touch you if the truth is public first. But Kevin's eyes darted toward the window. You don't understand. He's connected. My cousin worked in the IT department last year, said Lofton's been on the internal review board for digital security. He knows people. He can make files vanish. Elijah rubbed his temples, frustration boiling. So he's not just manipulating people. He's controlling the evidence. Arya exhaled sharply. Then we get ahead of him. We'll extract the data externally. I have a contact who specializes in forensic recovery. She stood and started pacing. Elijah, I need you to stay quiet for now. Don't engage online. Don't post anything. Let them think you're scared. It'll make the reveal stronger. Elijah looked up, his voice trembling with restrained fury. They're destroying my name in real time. I know, Arya said. But if you respond now, they'll twist your words. You'll look defensive. We're going to fight this smart with evidence. Kevin sat down, still fidgeting. The fake video's all over TikTok now too. They've edited it with sound effects, made it a meme. Elijah's jaw tightened. A meme, he repeated softly, disbelief turning into exhaustion. My life's a meme now. No one spoke for a long moment. The sound of rain against the office window filled the silence. Finally, Arya sat beside him. Elijah, listen to me. This isn't your failure. This is theirs. Every person who looks away because the truth is inconvenient. He nodded slowly, fighting the urge to let the anger consume him. They want me to break, he said. That's the goal. Then you don't give them that satisfaction, she said. Just then Kevin's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then froze. Elijah noticed his face drain of color. What is it? Kevin handed him the phone. On the screen was an email, short, unsigned, no return address. You're in violation of academic integrity protocols. Cease all unauthorized recording and data sharing immediately, or face disciplinary action. It had the university's digital header. Arya's eyes widened. They're threatening him. Elijah clenched his fists. They're going after the witnesses now. Kevin's breathing quickened. I didn't send anything to anyone. How did they even know? Arya cut him off. Because they monitor student accounts. They're watching every move. She turned to Elijah. We need to act fast. If they erase the server logs, we lose everything. Kevin looked helpless. You think he's doing this alone? Arya hesitated. No, she said finally. He's protected. Lofton's not just a professor. He's a symbol of the university's prestige, the kind they'd burn a student to protect. Elijah looked at both of them, his voice low but steady. Then we find another way to burn back. Arya gave a small, grim smile. You're learning faster than most. Outside, thunder rumbled. A storm building over campus. Kevin gathered his bag, eyes flicking nervously toward the window. I can pull the metadata tonight, he said quietly. But it has to stay between us. If he finds out I'm helping. Elijah interrupted softly. He won't. I promise. Kevin nodded, hesitated, then leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Lofton had the footage deleted. He said, I saw the IT ticket myself. But there's something else. Elijah frowned. What? Kevin glanced at the door, then back at him. It wasn't just him. The deletion request came from higher up, signed off by someone in the dean's office. The room fell still. Arya's expression hardened in disbelief. They're colluding. Kevin's voice trembled. I can prove it. Elijah stared at him, pulse racing, as Kevin whispered, but if I do, we're all going down with it. The truth was always there, just not where anyone expected to look. The air inside Arya Kane's office was heavier than usual, thick with the unsaid and the unbelievable. Kevin Min sat hunched in the same chair he had occupied days earlier. But this time his hands were steadier. He looked less like a student afraid of his own shadow and more like someone beginning to understand the weight of what he had and what it could do. I never told anyone this, Kevin began. But I run a vlog. It's private, just for me, mostly. I record all my classes, not just the audio, full video, front row, from my phone. I set it up in my pen case. It's habit, helps with rewatches, and sometimes I edit pieces for memory retention. Burst. Arya blinked, then smiled faintly. Kevin, you might have just saved this entire case. Kevin reached into his backpack, pulled out an older model smartphone with a cracked corner, and powered it on. He opened the camera roll, scrolling past dozens of blurry thumbnails labeled by course code and date. When he landed on one labeled Math 31 Trap Day, he tapped it open and handed the phone to Arya. The screen came alive with a familiar frame. Professor Lofton at the chalkboard, sleeves rolled up, smirk firmly in place. Students buzzed faintly in the background. Elijah sat at the front, unaware that history was about to repeat itself. Arya connected the phone to her laptop. The higher resolution screen brought the footage to life. There, Kevin pointed. Watch this part. At timestamp 0241, Lofton paused mid-sentence. The class hadn't started officially yet. Students were still settling, opening notebooks, sipping coffees. Lofton walked to the board, and under the guise of writing a prep equation, made a subtle alteration to the formula structure. He erased a single variable, adjusted the subscript, and rewrote it using a completely different syntax, one that would render the problem unsolvable. Pause it, Arya said. Go back. They replayed the sequence. It was smooth, almost casual, the kind of move only someone deeply fluent in the language of math could notice and abuse. He sabotaged it before class began, Elijah said quietly, watching his own humiliation play out from a third-person angle. Before I even walked to the board, it was already broken. And here, Kevin said, scrolling forward, is where he calls on you. Timestamp 0718. Lofton, standing with hands folded, asks Elijah to demonstrate his skills. The smirk was there. The condescension. The performative neutrality masking something much darker. They watched as Elijah approached the board, worked diligently, erased, rewrote, all while the trap sat silently in the equation, waiting to implode on him. Arya leaned back. We have it. The entire setup. From the equation's rigging to Elijah's clean performance on the test. And paired with the edited version circulating online, we can prove intentional tampering. But there's more, Kevin said. I have footage from the exam day too. Same camera setup. It shows Elijah never looking at anyone else's paper. Arya's eyes widened. You recorded the midterm. Kevin nodded. Just audio, but the video shows enough. I stitched clips from 2 angles. The class has a mirror wall behind the lecturer, so you can actually see Elijah's reflection. He never cheats. Not once. They sat in stunned silence for a moment. The implications were enormous. We need to compile this, Elijah said. All of it. Into something clear. Something undeniable. They spent the next 6 hours building a media package. Arya called in a favor from a former student, a video editor now working in digital advocacy to help create a professional timeline of events. The footage was organized into 5 chapters. The alteration, showing Lofton modifying the board. The setup, capturing the challenge equation being posed to Elijah. The trap, Elijah's attempt and visible confusion. The accusation, the edited exam video versus Kevin's original. The cover-up, metadata from the deleted footage, tied to faculty server logs. Each clip was time-stamped, watermarked, and narrated by Arya, who explained the context in clear, emotionally steady voiceover. This can't be just another complaint, she said. This has to be a reckoning. Elijah watched the final render in silence. It felt surreal, watching himself from multiple angles, watching a version of events no one believed until now. Do we leak it? He asked. Arya was quiet for a long time. If we do, it can't be traced back to you. Not yet. They'll try to suspend you before it spreads. Kevin looked up from his chair. Too late. Elijah turned. What? Kevin pointed to Elijah's laptop, where an email alert blinked in red. Subject: Notice of immediate disciplinary suspension. Elijah Walker. He clicked it open. Dear Mr. Walker, we regret to inform you that, effective immediately, you are placed on temporary suspension pending the outcome of an academic misconduct review. You are required to vacate campus housing by 6:00 p.m. tomorrow. Your class privileges, financial aid access, and student account will be frozen until further notice. Elijah felt the blood drain from his face. They moved faster than we thought, Arya whispered. Someone inside tipped them off, Kevin added. They know we're building something. Elijah stood, fists clenched, voice trembling. They're trying to erase me. No, Arya said firmly. They're reacting. That means they're scared. But if I leave campus, they'll think you're running, she finished. Which is exactly why you won't. Elijah looked at the screen again. The notification glared back at him like a final verdict. He took a deep breath. Then let's leak it. Now. Arya nodded. I'll use a proxy account. From a burner laptop. Kevin, can you upload a backup to a cloud folder with public access? Kevin was already typing. Within the hour, the package was uploaded under the anonymous username A Equation Exposed. Arya posted the first tweet.
Throw. Blackwood University is covering up a math professor's attempt to sabotage and expel a black student. Here's the proof.
She included the video links, stills, and metadata screenshots. Kevin added a YouTube mirror. Within 20 minutes, it had over 5,000 views. In less than an hour, it was being reshared by academic watchdog accounts, racial justice activists, and student unions across the country. The comments began flooding in. This is horrifying. I hope this student sues the entire university. This is why we need cameras in classrooms. Academic racism is real. This is the clearest example I've ever seen. Expose them all. But amidst the digital surge, Elijah's phone buzzed again. A new email. This time from an anonymous address. No subject, just a single line. Your truth just became a target. As Elijah stared at the screen, the hallway outside his dorm filled with footsteps. Then a knock. Not the soft kind. The loud, deliberate kind that signaled authority, campus security. They took his seat in the classroom, but not his voice. The knock rattled the door like a warning. Elijah opened it to find 2 campus security officers standing stone-faced. No small talk. No pretense. Just protocol. One held a clipboard, the other a sealed envelope. "You've been instructed to vacate your housing," the taller one said, "by university order." Behind them, a few students peeked from cracked doors, phones in hand, pretending not to record. Elijah said nothing. He simply nodded, took the envelope, and closed the door. Inside, the room was silent. Kevin stood frozen near the window, mouth half open. They're actually doing this." Elijah didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed a duffel bag from under his bed and began packing books first, then notebooks, then laptop charger. He didn't own much. Everything he needed fit in 2 bags and a folder thick with evidence. Arya arrived 10 minutes later. She didn't ask what happened. She saw the packed bags and the look in his eyes and knew. "They want the image of you walking out," she said softly. "It gives them a headline." Elijah zipped his jacket. "Let them watch. I'm not hiding." He walked down the hallway, bags over his shoulders, flanked by security. Students lined the corridor, whispering, gawking. One of them whispered loud enough to hear, "Guess he's not so smart after all." Another, "Cheaters never win." He kept his head high, his gaze forward. He'd studied here, fought here, suffered here, but they weren't going to erase him. Outside, the gray clouds hung low, matching the mood. Arya led him to her car. "You'll stay with me for now," she said. "They think pushing you off campus means they've silenced you. But they're wrong." By the next morning, everything had changed. The anonymous leak had exploded. The Twitter thread under the username #equation exposed now had over 100,000 retweets. Hashtags trended: unexposed Blackwood, Mathgate, Elijah Walker was set up. The YouTube video crossed 1 million views overnight. Influencers, academics, and civil rights advocates all picked it up. One viral post read, "They tried to silence a prodigy. Here's the truth." And beneath it, side-by-side footage of the trap equation and Lofton's smirk. A second post featured a quote from Arya's voiceover. "This was never about a mistake. It was a design, a system of quiet sabotage." News outlets began picking it up. BuzzFeed News, The Root, Vox, NPR's Code Switch. Each one asked for interviews. Arya declined on Elijah's behalf. Not yet. Not until they were ready. Meanwhile, local student organizations caught fire. Blackwood's Black Student Union released a statement condemning the university's suspension. So did the Latinx Coalition, the First Gen Alliance, and even the Mathematics Honor Society, which had previously distanced itself from Elijah. A petition demanding Elijah's reinstatement gained 20,000 signatures in a day. Students began organizing walkouts. Some wore shirts that read "The equation was the lie." Others marched silently past Lofton's lecture hall with duct tape over their mouths. Protest without sound. The university tried to hold the line. They issued a vague statement: "Blackwood University is committed to academic integrity and due process." But the tide had turned. Inside Arya's apartment, Elijah sat on the living room floor surrounded by devices. Phone, tablet, laptop, watching the narrative flip. Kevin stayed in contact but kept a low profile. He was still on campus, nervous. The footage metadata had been verified by an independent tech journalist who authenticated the timestamps. That report now circulated with the video, giving it another boost. Arya walked in with coffee, handed him a mug. "You're everywhere now," she said, watching the screen. "And not for the reasons they wanted." Elijah nodded. "But they still have the power. I'm still suspended." "Not for long," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You sound sure." "I sent the full unedited footage to the National Black Student Rights Coalition. They're preparing a legal brief, and they have one of the top civil rights lawyers in education watching now. They've seen these tactics before, just not this well documented." Elijah leaned back, letting the weight of the moment settle. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. His story had become a mirror, reflecting something much bigger, uglier, and older than one math class. And then it happened. At exactly 2:13 p.m., the university's official Twitter account posted this: "Blackwood University will hold a press conference tomorrow at noon to address recent public concerns. Professor Gregory Lofton will speak directly." The tweet blew up immediately. Arya stared at the screen. "They're putting him in front of a mic?" Elijah narrowed his eyes. "They're letting him defend himself," Kevin texted a minute later. "He's going to lie." Another tweet followed from a student reporter. "Sources inside the math department say Lofton has been preparing remarks and is being advised by the university's legal team." Elijah's fingers curled into fists. He's going to spin this. Say the footage was manipulated. That I misunderstood. He'll paint himself as the victim. Arya's jaw tightened. They'll position him as a misunderstood genius, and you as the angry, ungrateful student who got overwhelmed. They're going to twist it all back. No, she said, her voice steel. Because this time, the world is watching. Elijah's phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. No subject line, just one line of text. Ask him about 2010. See what he says then. Lofton stood at the podium and doubled down. The press conference began under an overcast sky, the kind that made everything look like grayscale, fitting for a day when truth itself was being shaded. The media tent on Blackwood University's quad was packed. Reporters from CNN, The Root, and even campus publications sat shoulder to shoulder, cameras humming, waiting for a spectacle. In the front row, students whispered and texted live reactions. Some wore shirts reading "Stand with Elijah." Others carried printed posters of his face beside the words "Truth, Nail, Trouble." But when Professor Gregory Lofton stepped up to the microphone, his face carried the serene confidence of a man who believed institutions would always bend in his favor. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and smiled. Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by saying that the recent online attacks against myself and the university have been deeply troubling. As educators, we strive for fairness, discipline, and truth. And yet, in this digital age, truth is the first casualty of public outrage. Murmurs ran through the audience. He paused, savoring them.
The video that has circulated online,
He continued, is, I'm afraid to say, doctored. It has been tampered with by individuals outside the university who appear to have an agenda. What you have seen is not a faithful representation of my classroom or my teaching methods. He gestured toward the crowd as if offering wisdom. I welcome honest discussion, but lies, particularly ones that harm academic integrity, cannot stand. A journalist from the Chronicle of Higher Learning raised a hand. Professor Lofton, the footage shows you altering the equation before class began. Are you saying that was fabricated? He smiled, tight-lipped. A professor's board notes change constantly before lectures. It's part of teaching. The implication that I sabotaged a student is preposterous. In fact, I have always encouraged diversity and inclusion in my classrooms. Another reporter chimed in. Then why was Mr. Walker suspended? That decision, Lofton replied, was made by the university's academic review committee, not by me. Mr. Walker is a bright young man, but he has unfortunately become a disruptive influence in an environment meant for scholarship. Sometimes, ambition can outpace readiness. The phrase hung in the air. Disruptive influence. It sounded so polite, so administrative, yet everyone knew what it meant. It was coded language, a public execution disguised as civility. Arya watched from home, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Elijah sat beside her on the couch, face unreadable. He's calm, Elijah said quietly, like he rehearsed every word. He did, Arya muttered. And look, they're letting him own the narrative. On screen, Lofton concluded. I will continue my work with integrity, as I have for the past 22 years. I ask that we all remember that universities should be places of learning, not arenas for mob justice. Applause broke out, not from students but from the back rows. Wealthy alumni, donors, and department heads nodded approvingly. It was theater, perfectly staged. The next morning, major newspapers ran headlines that echoed Lofton's phrasing. Respected professor denies allegations of bias. Blackwood professor faces online harassment over edited video. For a moment it worked. Public sentiment wavered. On social media, threads split in two. Those who saw through the lie, and those who didn't. You people believe anything online. Another student crying racism to cover up failure. They're ruining a man's career over clicks. But then something unexpected happened. An independent cybersecurity firm, based in Chicago, VisaLogic Analytics, publicly volunteered to analyze the original footage. Their team specialized in forensic video verification for legal cases and media integrity. Arya forwarded them the files. Within 72 hours, their report dropped. It was brutal. Conclusion: no evidence of manipulation detected. Video files consistent with original metadata. Cut transitions and viral clip confirmed as manual edits. Inconsistent with native timestamp continuity. In simpler terms, Elijah's version was real. Lofton's narrative was a lie. The moment the report went public, the tide turned again. The Washington Post ran a feature titled, "Digital Deception: How a Blackwood Professor Framed His Own Student." CNN aired a short segment during its education hour. Commentators debated the racial undertones of academic gatekeeping. Students across campuses nationwide used the story as a rallying cry for anti-racist reform in academia. Blackwood University went silent. For 2 days, their communications office issued no statements. Emails to the dean's office were met with automated responses. Then came an email, not to the university, but to Elijah himself. Subject: Invitation to speak, National Black STEM Futures Summit. From Dr. Patricia Quinn, Chair of Diversity Advancement Council. Dear Mr. Walker, we would be honored to have you share your story at our upcoming conference. Your courage and commitment to truth exemplify the resilience we aim to highlight in this year's theme, Breaking Barriers. Elijah read it twice. They want me to speak? Aria smiled for the first time in days. They don't just want you, they need you. You've become a symbol. He looked down at the email again. Part of him wanted to celebrate, but another part remained wary. They'll try to spin this too. They can't. The data's out there now, she said. And this, she gestured at the invitation, is how you reclaim your voice. The days leading up to the summit felt unreal. Elijah worked on his speech in Aria's apartment, pacing between windows and scribbling notes. Every line mattered. Every word carried weight. Don't make it about vengeance, Aria advised one night. Make it about vision. He nodded. I want it to mean something beyond me. Then tell them what happens when systems fail, brilliant minds, and what we lose when they do. The night before the summit, Elijah rehearsed his final draft. They told me I didn't belong in advanced mathematics. But what they really meant was they couldn't imagine a black student redefining what belonging looks like. I was taught that proof is the language of truth, so I used proof to show the lie. Aria clapped softly when he finished. Perfect. He smiled, for the first time feeling like maybe the nightmare had purpose. The next morning his suit was pressed, his speech printed twice, one copy folded neatly in his pocket. At 9:15 a.m., his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He ignored it. Probably a reporter. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again, this time with an email notification from the summit committee. Subject: Update. Regarding your scheduled appearance. Message: Dear Mr. Walker, due to recent developments and heightened media attention surrounding your case, we regret to inform you that your speaking engagement at the National Black STEM Futures Summit has been postponed. The committee feels your current controversy may distract from the broader goals of the event. Elijah stared at the screen. His throat went dry. Postponed, he murmured. Aria looked up from her laptop. What happened? He handed her the phone. She read the email silently, then slammed it down. They're calling you too controversial? You're the victim. Elijah ran a hand through his hair. Pacing. They don't want backlash from donors or universities. I've become radioactive. Aria's voice hardened. They used your courage to boost their event, then backed off when it got inconvenient. Typical. Elijah sat down, silent, staring at nothing. Outside, a light rain tapped against the window. Slow, rhythmic, steady. Maybe I was never meant to speak at their table, he said finally. Maybe I need to build my own. As he spoke, his phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown sender with no subject line. He opened it. One sentence glared back. They didn't cancel you, Elijah. They were told to. They said he didn't belong. Now the nation knew his name. The summit tried to uninvite him, but the country wouldn't allow it. The email announcing Elijah's removal from the speaker lineup had barely circulated before the backlash began. Within hours, the hashtag Let Elijah Speak trended nationwide. Civil rights attorneys, STEM leaders, black scientists, and prominent public thinkers lit up Twitter and LinkedIn with scorching posts. Elijah Walker is exactly the kind of voice this summit needs. Shame on them. Controversial? No. He's the truth they're afraid of. When black excellence becomes inconvenient, they try to call it disruptive. But we see you, Elijah. Dr. Tasha Lenore, a MacArthur Genius Fellow in Theoretical Physics, posted a 3-minute video slamming the decision and calling on fellow black scholars to boycott the summit unless Elijah was reinstated. We cannot continue to be invited into white-curated spaces, only to be discarded when our truth challenges their comfort. The pressure hit hard and fast. By nightfall, over 40 scheduled panelists publicly withdrew, including keynote speakers. sponsors threatened to pull funding. One of the STEM nonprofits that had partnered with the summit issued a formal demand: reinstate Mr. Walker, publicly, or we're out. The organizers cracked by morning. Elijah's inbox pinged at 7:42. Subject: official apology and reinstatement. Dear Mr. Walker, we deeply regret our earlier decision. It was not reflective of the values we strive to uphold. You have been fully reinstated as our featured speaker. Elijah didn't smile. Not this time. The damage had already spoken volumes. Still, he understood the importance of showing up. Not for them, but for every student watching. The auditorium buzzed as people poured in. Folding chairs were added last minute. The summit had never seen a turnout like this. Not for anyone. Elijah stood backstage with Arya. His speech folded in his pocket again. Same suit. Same conviction. But this time, no self-doubt. Don't hold back, Arya whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. Not for them. Not for their comfort. Say it all. He nodded once. When he walked on stage, the audience stood. Not the polite kind of standing ovation. This was thunderous, cathartic, charged with fury and pride. People clapped because they knew what he represented. They clapped because he made it to the mic when so many others had been forced into silence. He looked out at them. Students, scholars, mentors, then unfolded the paper in his hand. But when he began speaking, he didn't read it. My name is Elijah Walker, he said. I came here with proof, with equations, with video, but the truth I'm here to share isn't just in the data. He paused. It's in the story, the one they didn't want you to hear. He paced slowly, eyes locked with the crowd. They said I didn't belong in the advanced math program. They said I was unprepared, that I was disruptive. But what they really meant was that I was unpredictable. A low hum ran through the room. I wasn't supposed to know how to challenge them. I wasn't supposed to recognize the trap they laid. I was supposed to accept the lie and thank them for the chance to be here. He raised his voice, letting it ring. But I've learned something. Black brilliance is never controversial. It's feared. The audience broke into applause, but Elijah wasn't finished. When you come from a place where opportunity is rare, you learn to make your own. When you're the only black student in a sea of skepticism, you learn to speak with precision. But most of all, when they try to erase you, you learn to document everything. He gestured to the screen behind him. Footage of Lofton's trap played in silence. The moment he altered the board, the edited exam video, the restored original. Then Elijah spoke again. This isn't just about one student. It's about every system that protects mediocrity when it's comfortable and punishes excellence when it's black. The room rose again. Cheers, applause, tears. Some people clapped with both hands in the air. Others just stood frozen, watching history unfold. When Elijah left the stage, Arya was waiting. You burned it down, she whispered, eyes glistening. No, he said. I just showed them the match. By the next day, the speech had gone viral. Clips flooded TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. News outlets quoted him. High schools played it in classrooms. Universities issued statements promising internal reviews of academic protocols related to equity and inclusion. But more importantly, professors around the country started asking questions. A group of tenured black STEM faculty from NYU, Stanford, Spelman, and Georgia Tech signed an open letter to Blackwood University. The treatment of Elijah Walker reflects a systemic failure. We demand an external investigation into faculty conduct, especially within the Department of Mathematics, and full academic reinstatement for Mr. Walker. Another wave of faculty followed, this time from within Blackwood. Anonymous letters from assistant professors and department TAs began leaking online, suggesting long-standing concerns about Lofton's behavior and curriculum discrimination. One memo read, several minority students have quietly transferred out of his courses over the years, citing hostile academic environments. But no complaints were ever pursued. We regret our silence. The dominoes were falling. Then came the final crack. The Blackwood Board of Regents, the highest oversight authority in the university, released a short but seismic statement. We are initiating a full independent investigation into the Department of Mathematics, its leadership and faculty conduct. Effective immediately. A tweet followed from the official university account. We hear you. We're watching. And we're acting. Elijah read it in Arya's apartment, still dressed in his summit suit, tie loosened, hands wrapped around a cup of tea he hadn't touched. Arya sat beside him, quiet. He looked up. So, it's real now? Arya nodded slowly. It's starting to be. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up, read the screen, then froze. You need to see this, she said. She handed the phone to Elijah. It was a leaked internal email from Lofton's office, sent years ago. The subject line, "Too many of them are getting through." The man who tried to discredit a black student was exposed by math itself. Elijah stared at the phone in silence, the light of Arya's screen reflecting off his stunned expression. The subject line of the leaked internal email echoed in his head like a cold wind slipping under the door. Too many of them are getting through. The email was dated 7 years ago, sent from Lofton's university address to a select group of faculty. The message, though carefully worded, dripped with intent. We need to revisit the entry standards for non-traditional admets. Our advanced tracks are becoming saturated with underprepared candidates. It's beginning to compromise the department's rigor. Frankly, too many of them are getting through. No names, no direct racial references, but the implication was clear to anyone who lived that reality. Them wasn't about academic qualifications, it was about skin. Arya's fingers trembled as she clicked open the email thread. Replies followed. Short, complicit nods from others in the math department. Agreed. The bar must be maintained. Happy to revisit admissions discretion policies. Maybe it's time to recommend stricter placement prerequisites. It was a quiet conspiracy. Institutional, sterile, and deliberate. We have to send this, Arya whispered. Elijah nodded, but his voice was low, bitter. This was never just about me. No, she said. It was about making sure someone like you never got this far to begin with. The leak spread like wildfire. An anonymous source had forwarded the thread to a student-run whistleblower site, which posted it under the headline, "Inside the Department, How Blackwood Protected a Culture of Academic Gatekeeping." Within hours, the email made national news. Screenshots trended alongside Elijah's speech. Overnight, Lofton's legacy shifted from brilliant, academic to the architect of an exclusionary machine. But that was just the beginning. The Board of Regents' investigation kicked into overdrive. They didn't just review the footage or interview Arya. They brought in external auditors, civil rights attorneys, and data scientists to comb through a decade's worth of records. What they found cracked the facade open entirely. Multiple past student complaints had been buried. Formally submitted, never escalated. Most of them came from black or brown students in Lofton's classes. One from 2015. I was asked in front of the class if I'd considered a less theoretical field. It was humiliating. No one else was spoken to that way. Another from I was told my work lacked mathematical maturity. I had the highest grade in the section. None of these complaints had ever been followed up. Arya sat with Elijah as the news broke, scrolling through a PDF of redacted testimonies. This was a pattern, she said, and they knew. Then came the second fracture. A whistleblower, a junior faculty member in the department, came forward in a statement to the board. She described a culture of fear under Lofton's leadership, where junior staff were discouraged from challenging grades, told to maintain the prestige of the program, and subtly guided on which students to invest in. She didn't name names, but the implication was undeniable. Lofton had built a department not around brilliance, but around gatekeeping disguised as excellence. He didn't want the best minds, Arya said. He wanted the safest ones. Then came the twist no one expected. A data audit of Lofton's most cited research. A set of papers on advanced optimization theory revealed inconsistencies. The independent team cross-referenced his published results with his source data. The math didn't add up. Literally, some calculations were correct in theory, but unverifiable in execution. The test data used in his most famous paper, cited in over a dozen international journals, was found to be irreproducible under identical conditions. In layman's terms, falsified. Elijah, Arya said, handing him the latest report. He didn't just lie to you. He's been lying to the academic world for years. Elijah read the conclusion, his hands trembling. We find that key elements of Professor Gregory Lofton's research are either misrepresented or unsupported by verifiable datasets. The claim of groundbreaking mathematical discovery is, at best, misleading, at worst fraudulent. 2 days later, the university issued an internal memo. Effective immediately, Professor Gregory Lofton is placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of multiple investigations. The announcement was sterile, but the message was loud. The genius had fallen. The campus reacted with shock and anger. Students who once defended Lofton now whispered apologies. Others took down old praise posts. A few vocal supporters clung to denial, calling it a witch hunt. But the evidence was overwhelming. Elijah watched it unfold with a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. He could have taught us, he said one night. He could have lifted us. Arya sat beside him, nodding. He chose power over legacy. It should have ended there. A clean finish. But systems never close their own doors so easily. One afternoon, while Elijah was reviewing a new round of media interview requests, a courier knocked on Arya's apartment door. A plain envelope. No branding. Just his name. Inside, a letter from Blackwood University's legal department. Arya read it aloud. Dear Mr. Walker, given the evolving circumstances, and in light of the public attention surrounding your case, Blackwood University is prepared to offer you a private settlement to resolve any pending or future claims related to your recent academic suspension and media involvement. Her voice slowed as she reached the next lines. This agreement includes the following: reinstatement of full scholarship, official reversal of your academic suspension, a financial settlement of $75,000 for reputational harm, and a formal statement of apology. Elijah blinked. They're paying me to be quiet. Arya read the final clause. In return, Mr. Walker agrees to sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, preventing any future public commentary on faculty conduct, internal investigations, or academic policies related to this matter. Silence filled the room. Elijah stared at the document for a long time. Then he spoke, slow and firm. They want to buy back the narrative. Yes? Arya said. This isn't about justice. This is about erasure. Again. He stood, pacing. If I sign this, they get to clean their hands, rewrite history. They'll call it reconciliation, she said bitterly. But it's containment. Elijah looked out the window. Campus lights flickered in the distance. Somewhere beyond them, a classroom door still bore Lofton's name. This isn't enough, he whispered. Not anymore. He turned back to Arya, eyes burning. I'm not signing anything. I want the truth, and this time I want it on record. They tried to buy his silence, but Elijah wanted justice. Not hush money. Elijah didn't hesitate. He folded the NDA neatly along its creases and slid it back into the envelope. The courier was still waiting in the hallway, shoulders rigid, eyes pretending not to see the weight of the moment. Tell them no, Elijah said flatly. The man blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. No deal. No silence. The door clicked shut behind him. Arya stood at the kitchen table, arms folded across her chest, watching the envelope like it was a loaded weapon. You sure? She asked. I'm done negotiating with people who lied in ink, Elijah said. If I sign that paper, I'm helping them bury everything I just uncovered. He picked up his phone and opened Twitter. Arya's eyes widened. Wait, but he was already typing. Blackwood University just offered me $75,000 and a scholarship to stay silent, to sign an NDA, to make this disappear. I said no. Because this fight was never about money. It's about let them come. I'm not afraid of them anymore. No more silence. Expose Blackwood. He hit post. The tweet detonated across the internet. Within 20 minutes, it was on the trending page. Students reposted it. Journalists screenshot it. Lawyers weighed in. Civil rights leaders retweeted it, with fire emojis and full-throated endorsements. This is what integrity looks like. You can't buy justice. Thank you, Elijah. Silence is what protects racism. Elijah chose courage. Elijah's inbox flooded with press inquiries. CNN, MSNBC, NPR, even The Daily Show reached out. Requests poured in for interviews, op-eds, and panel appearances. But Elijah didn't want airtime. He wanted impact. That weekend, 60 Minutes aired a segment titled The Whistleblower of Blackwood, featuring Elijah in a gray turtleneck, seated opposite journalist Michelle Browning. The footage was powerful. Clips of the doctored exam video, Lofton's email, the summit speech, and Elijah's simple but piercing commentary. They told me I was too ambitious, too vocal, but I was never too anything. I was just visible. That's what they hated. The episode closed with Elijah saying the one thing they never expected. If this is what they do to one student, imagine what they've done to those who never had cameras, or mentors, or proof. The world didn't just hear him. They felt him. And the effects were seismic. On Blackwood's campus, students organized a day-long sit-in at the mathematics building. Hundreds of protesters filled the halls, holding signs that read, "We are not disruptions. Math doesn't lie. People do." End academic gaslighting. Faculty were split. Some defended Lofton quietly, but most had grown silent. Others, finally freed by the fire Elijah started, began to speak. One anonymous black faculty member submitted a letter to the student newspaper. "When I first joined Blackwood, I was warned to stay away from Professor Lofton, not because of his politics, but because of his patterns. We all knew. We failed our students by staying quiet." Aria's phone buzzed with congratulatory messages. Then came a more formal one, an email from the provost. "In recognition of your leadership, your tenure-track candidacy has been accelerated. A formal recommendation will follow." Aria smiled when she read it. She deserved more than this small justice. But it was something. She forwarded it to Elijah with a single line. "The ground is shifting." Then something else began to happen. Something no one predicted. Other black students started coming forward. Anonymous posts on the whistleblower site became a flood. In 2019, I was told by my econ professor that black kids usually struggle with theory. My chemistry advisor said I should consider switching majors before I wasted more time. I had proof I earned my grade. They still downgraded it. Elijah read each one, stunned by the breadth. These weren't isolated incidents. They were patterns, institutional ghosts now being dragged into the light. He posted again. "To every student who's ever been gaslit, erased, or undermined. I see you, and this fight is for all of us." His following doubled in days. And slowly, Blackwood changed. The university announced an independent task force for racial equity in academia, not the performative kind. This one had teeth, outside oversight, rotating student seats, and the power to recommend dismissals. The math department was restructured. Anonymous course evaluations were now reviewed by a third-party panel. Faculty bias training became mandatory. But more importantly, student advocacy offices were expanded, funded, and staffed. Elijah didn't trust them yet. Not fully. But he watched with cautious hope. Then the unexpected email arrived. From the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Department of Applied Mathematics and Computational Science. "Dear Mr. Walker, we've followed your journey closely, not only for the courage you've shown, but for the clarity of thought and character behind it. We'd be honored to offer you a full-ride graduate fellowship to continue your research with us. Effective next term. The offer includes housing, a stipend, and an invitation to join our Diversity and Ethics in STEM Research Committee." It didn't feel real. Elijah stared at the message in his inbox, blinking. Aria walked in, saw his expression, and froze. "What happened?" He turned the screen. "They want me at MIT. Her eyes filled with tears. "They don't just want you. They need you." He laughed, the first full laugh in weeks. Then he typed a reply. "I accept, but I'm not leaving quietly." Just as he hit send, another email appeared. Subject line, "Keynote invitation, return to Blackwood." The message read, "The new administration would like to invite you to speak at the commencement ceremony. We believe it's time to come full circle." The student they tried to erase became the voice they couldn't ignore. The transition to MIT was smoother than Elijah expected. Not because the pressure lessened, but because the air finally felt breathable. In the hallways of a university built on brilliance and bold thinking, Elijah found himself surrounded by people who didn't question if he belonged, only how far he wanted to go. He accepted the fellowship without fanfare, quietly moving to Cambridge, where the labs were open late, and the minds moved even faster. But he didn't come just to study. He came to disrupt with proof, with policy, and with presence. His first paper was released 6 weeks into the semester. Mathematical Gatekeeping, an empirical analysis of race, pedagogy and patterned exclusion in elite STEM programs. It wasn't just data points and charts. It was lived experience coded into algorithms, trauma broken down into measurable impact, with citations from student testimonies and anonymous academic whistleblowers. The paper sent ripples through the STEM education community, not because it was radical, but because it was undeniable. He didn't stop there. Elijah launched a mentorship collective, the Elevation Project, pairing underrepresented high school students with graduate mentors in STEM fields. Within a month, chapters opened in Atlanta, Chicago, Oakland, and Newark. He didn't just hand out advice. He built a system, a scaffolding where no student would fall through cracks carved by race. When a black freshman from North Carolina messaged him saying, Because of you, I didn't drop out. Elijah didn't reply right away. He just sat with the words, letting them sink in. The work was starting to echo. Back at Blackwood, change came slowly. But it came. The Board of Regents, under new leadership after a wave of retirements and resignations, made public apologies to Elijah. Not just press release apologies, but a signed, formal letter delivered to his inbox. The new president, Laura Jenks, a former civil rights attorney turned academic reformist, wrote him personally, "Elijah, your name now stands as a marker in our institutional memory. We failed you, but your integrity forced us to confront what we long ignored. Thank you, and we are deeply sorry." The letter was printed in full in the New York Times under the headline, "An Institution's Reckoning, and One Student's Unbreakable Will." Then, quietly, almost like an afterthought, the announcement was made. Professor Gregory Lofton has submitted his resignation, effective immediately. There was no ceremony, no farewell speech, no preservation of legacy. The man who once shaped futures with a smirk, now left through the side door, not fired, not publicly disgraced, but emptied of power all the same. A footnote in the story of his own undoing. Elijah read the announcement alone in his apartment. He didn't smile. There was nothing to celebrate in a man's downfall, only in the justice that finally stood where silence used to sit. Arya called that night. "They're inviting you back," she said carefully. He paused. "To what?" "The new administration wants you to speak at commencement. Keynote. Spring." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "That's poetic." "No," she said. "That's power." He didn't answer right away. "I don't know if I want to stand on that stage," Elijah admitted. "Not because I'm afraid, but because I remember how it felt sitting in that audience, feeling invisible." Arya was quiet for a moment. "Then stand for the ones still feeling that. Make sure they don't leave thinking their silence is survival." The morning of the ceremony arrived, dressed in soft sun and scattered clouds. The quad was filled with rows of folding chairs and students in caps and gowns. The air buzzed with celebration, and something else. Anticipation. Elijah stepped onto the campus he had once walked as a ghost. Not remembered, not celebrated, just endured. Now, whispers followed him for another reason. Cameras turned, students clapped, parents pointed him out to their children. He stood backstage, waiting for his name to be called. His speech folded in his coat pocket. Same handwritten draft from MIT, still unedited. Arya walked up beside him, now tenured, dressed in full regalia. "You ready?" He nodded. "I'm not speaking for them," he said. "I'm speaking for the ones who never got to." She smiled. "That's why it'll matter." From the stage he looked out at the graduating class. Some stared wide-eyed, others teary, a few smiling already, the way people do when they recognize a moment bigger than themselves. He took a breath and spoke. 3 years ago, I stood in this same crowd, not as a speaker, but as a student. I was told I didn't belong, not directly, of course. That would have been too honest. I was told in whispers, in course assignments designed to break me, in edited videos, in silence after excellence. They tried to fail me with math, but I passed with proof. The crowd erupted. But Elijah raised his hand gently. "I'm not here to be a hero. I'm here because no one else should have to bleed in a classroom just to prove they belong in it. If you remember anything from me today, let it be this: brilliance isn't what gets you in. It's what keeps you standing when the room tilts against you." He finished quietly. "We are not the exception. We are the future. And we are already here." A standing ovation rose like thunder. Students cried. Parents clapped like their hands had purpose. Faculty stood. Even those who once stayed silent now nodded. Some with guilt, others with grace. The moment was full circle. Elijah stepped off the stage, heart racing not with fear but with peace. As he returned to his seat, a young black student from the front row passed him a folded note. It read, "There's another Lofton in my department. I don't know what to do." The same board that tried to humiliate him now bore his name. A week after the commencement ceremony, Elijah Walker stood once more in front of a lecture hall podium. This time, there were no hidden equations on the board behind him, no glares from a professor waiting to watch him stumble. No trap, just a room packed with students, faculty, cameras, and reporters. A new kind of audience, and a new kind of authority. Above the chalkboard, a plaque had been unveiled just minutes earlier. Walker Hall, in honor of academic resilience and truth. The very space where Lofton had once drawn a false equation to break Elijah's spirit now bore the name of the student he failed to silence. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Elijah stepped up to the microphone, cleared his throat, and opened his final speech, titled simply, "The Wrong Equation." His voice was calm, but carried a quiet, undeniable charge. The first time I stood in this room, I was set up to fail, not by math, but by a man who didn't believe someone like me should succeed inside this building. He let the silence sit before continuing. I was handed an equation, one that was wrong by design. It wasn't meant to teach, it was meant to exclude, to confuse, to embarrass. It was never about solving the problem. It was about being the problem. A few gasps. A shifting murmur. Even now, the memory rippled through the crowd like a fresh bruise. And yet, I solved it. Not with numbers, but with truth, with documentation, with refusal. I refused to stay quiet, to stay small, to accept that what happened to me was normal. Because it wasn't. He stepped from behind the podium and walked slowly toward the chalkboard. The same one, untouched since the plaque went up. He looked out again. See, in math we're taught that every problem has a solution, if you understand the variables. But injustice is like a flawed equation. It looks correct, it feels complete, but somewhere, buried in the formula, is a contradiction. And when that contradiction is race, the answer is always inconvenient, especially to the people who wrote the problem in the first place. The room was silent now, entirely still. Elijah smiled, not smug, not bitter, just clear. You don't solve injustice by solving the math. You solve it by changing the equation, by making sure no one has to be humiliated in front of a blackboard just to prove their humanity. He gestured to the board behind him, now framed in warm wood, with the newly mounted dedication plaque glinting under the lights. They used to call this Lofton Hall, Elijah said, a name synonymous with silence, with fear, with barriers disguised as standards. But this is now Walker Hall, and it stands for something else. Another pause. It stands for the students they tried to erase, for the questions they never wanted asked, for the voices that refused to be quiet, for every time someone said, "Are you sure you belong here?" And we answered, yes, loudly, publicly, permanently. He returned to the podium, reached into his jacket, pulled out a marker, then turned back to the board and, in clear, bold strokes, wrote, "Worth male white acceptance." The room erupted. A standing ovation thundered from the crowd. Chairs scraped, hands clapped, phones recorded. Some cried, some cheered. Every face in that room, black, white, young, old, now stared at Elijah, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with respect. The applause didn't stop for minutes. Elijah let it wash over him, not to bask in it, but to seal it, to absorb what it meant, what it signified. He looked straight into the cameras as the room quieted. His voice lowered. Never let them define your worth, because they'll always underestimate it. Your worth is not in their equations, in their tests, in their rules written to exclude. Your worth is proven in what you refuse to let them take from you. So don't wait for permission to be brilliant. Just be. After the speech, Arya stood in the back of the room, arms crossed over her chest, smiling with the kind of pride that had no words. She didn't speak when Elijah passed by. She just touched his shoulder lightly, a nod between soldiers. As guests filtered out, students lingered. Some asked for photos, others handed Elijah letters, notes, even a few folded class schedules with circles around their toughest courses. One whispered, "Thank you for surviving loud enough for us to hear you." Outside, a bronze plaque was now embedded in the sidewalk near the hall's main entrance. It read, "Dedicated to Elijah Walker, for showing that excellence is not what they allow, it's what we claim." The camera pulled back slowly from the plaque, and in the distance a young black freshman approached the hall for his first day of class. He paused in front of the building, eyes locked on the name Walker Hall, his reflection caught in the glass, his fists clenched. Then he stepped inside head high, eyes burning with hope. They tried to silence him with shame. He answered with truth. If you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or told you didn't belong, this story was for you. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.